What a historic victory for gun rights. As part of H.R. 1, the big, beautiful reconciliation bill that Congress just passed on the 22nd, a Gun Owners of America provision was also passed that completely stripped suppressors out of the National Firearms Act. But the story of how we got there didn't start, nor does it end, with this vote. Stick around as I walk you through the year-long journey it's been to get to this point and what you can do to help. Hi, I'm Ben Sanderson, and you're watching the Minuteman Moment. I'll be honest, it's been hard keeping this a secret for the past year, but it was all worth it to pass such a monumental piece of legislation to restore our Second Amendment rights. This whole project started in September of last year, when we heard that Congress was going to be doing a budget reconciliation bill. A budget reconciliation bill, to put it simply, is a tax bill that deals with the budget exclusively, meaning that we couldn't just throw our legislative wish list of abolishing all gun laws or turning the ATF into a convenience store effective immediately into this type of bill. But there's a particular quirk to these types of bills that make them special. They can't be filibustered, meaning that they only require a simple majority in the Senate to pass. This means that because the Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the presidency, there's no need to make a deal with the opposition to pass a budget reconciliation bill. This is a perfect opportunity to push Republicans to back up all this tough talk with real action. Even though we can't change criminal law through the budget reconciliation process, only taxation, there are quite a few items that are regulated through taxation that fall under the Second Amendment. Because of this, the idea we landed on that would have the greatest success of passing was to deregulate suppressors, SBRs, SBSs, and AOWs from the NFA. But how do we come to this specific goal over, say, national concealed carry reciprocity or banning all red flag laws? Well, it comes down to the fact that the National Firearms Act is primarily a taxation bill. Most people think of the NFA as an old piece of gun control from almost 100 years ago. And while yes, it's true that the NFA is an unconstitutional infringement on your Second Amendment rights, the whole reason that Congress claims to have the authority to regulate NFA firearms is because they treat it like a tax. But don't just take our word for it. Here are several court cases, including from the Supreme Court, that show how the NFA is primarily a tax, and that any of the forms that are part of this registration scheme are tax forms. One of the biggest cases would be the U.S. Supreme Court case Sonzinski versus United States that held that the NFA's primary function is as a tax, and it does not cease to be a tax, even though it has secondary function as gun control. Now, a big reason we need to talk about the NFA in the context of taxes is because of the Senate rule called the Byrd Rule. The Byrd Rule prevents the inclusion of non-financial focused policy into this bill. So those horrible $200 tax stamps are exactly what's going to help us end the NFA. So fast forward to January of this year, the second the 119th Congress started, we began by working with our allies in the Senate and the House to push this idea forward. This is where we have to say a big thank you to Senators Mike Crapo, Senator Roger Marshall, and Representatives Ben Cline and Representative Andrew Clyde, the sponsors of the Hearing Protection Act and the Short Act, respectively. Together, we all worked on not only introducing these bills and getting co-sponsors, but also perfecting the bills and doing background research so we would have a foolproof bill to bring to reconciliation when the time was right. In the next few months, we continued to grow support with key members on the Senate Finance Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee, getting allies on our side to introduce the full HBA and Short Act as part of the bill during the process. A lot went into these conversations, as our Byrd Rule experts explained how exactly our bills were able to be added to the reconciliation process and how it could pass. At the same time, we heard rumors that instead of doing the full bills, people were instead pushing for a simple suppressor tax reduction, leaving all of the registration paperwork in place. But earlier this month, May of 2025, we learned that the House Ways and Means Committee had decided they were only going to do part of HBA, which still would have removed suppressors from the NFA. While some might have taken this as a win, we continued to push for the inclusion of the Short Act, since all it would take is another anti-gun administration and pistol braces would be illegal again. At the same time, we learned two disturbing facts. First, we learned about a firearms industry company that was lobbying against the HBA, and second, we learned that the committee had gone cold feet and removed the hearing protection language and instead only did a reduction in tax and only for the transfer of suppressors. The leading compromiser who was giving up the fight before there even was one? Who was that, you ask? Representative David Kustoff. Now, Representative Kustoff insisted that tax reduction was the best thing we could get because of the rules of the Senate.
So let's be clear. I strongly believe that suppressors should not be regulated or registered under the National Firearms Act. And since 2017, I've supported legislation in every Congress to remove the suppressors from the NFA. I'm going to continue to do so. But right now, today, we have a unique opportunity to secure a historic win for our Second Amendment rights and gun owners across our nation. But we also have to realize the reality of the reconciliation process and what can be passed in the United States Senate. So that's why I've pushed to include the best possible deal for gun owners in this bill that will satisfy the Byrd rule.
But our months and months of research have shown that's just wrong. Not to mention the evidence from our experts in the Senate, our lawyers, and our reconciliation team right here in DC. That's exactly why we activated our Grassroots membership to flood the House Ways and Means Committee with phone calls. We can tell you that committee members received thousands of calls in that week. Your efforts flooded the line so badly that the committee turned their phones off. In fact, during meetings with key members of the committee, we heard the phones ringing off the hook. Thanks to the countless videos from our YouTube allies, your emails, your posts on X, and your calls, we were able to keep the pressure on these compromise-hungry members of Congress.
And so we need to try and win right now by basically putting as much pressure as we can in these final hours on the House of Representatives.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it, brother. Seriously, thanks for the update on all this stuff. Like I said, check out the GOA post that I shared earlier on Twitter/X. If you want to get all of that, I've also pinned the phone numbers up here at the top of the chat.
In fact, your activism was so impactful, we were able to get the correct language to deregulate suppressors into the manager's amendment at the Rules Committee. What this means is that the bill was amended to include our language in the base text. So instead of having to deal with an up or down amendment vote on the full House floor, we were able to make it so everyone who voted for the full bill was also voting for the deregulation of suppressors. We couldn't be prouder to have deregulated suppressors, but the fight's not finished. Unfortunately, the SHORT Act was not included in the House final bill text, but it's not over just yet. The bill now has to go through the Senate, where there are ample opportunities to get the SHORT Act added to the bill before the president signs it into law. That's why we need your help to protect the HBA in the Senate and add the SHORT Act into the budget reconciliation bill. So please, call your senators and tell them to add the SHORT Act and keep the HBA in the final bill to deliver a historic win for the Second Amendment community. You can find your senator's phone number by either checking out their website or calling the Senate switchboard at 202-224-3121. And if you have a Democrat senator, you can also help by calling the Senate leadership by calling Majority Leader Thune and Majority Whip Barrasso. Now thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with GOA's latest fights for your rights.